Businessman and Charleston City Council member Gary White has officially filed to run for mayor of the city of Charleston. I sit down exclusively with Gary for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Listen to this interview Thursday on my free Quintin's Close-Ups iHeartRadio podcast. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Gary White, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Good morning, Quintin. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Obviously, you are officially a mayoral candidate for the city of Charleston. And I want to go back to your Facebook page on yesterday. You said this quote, "I have very deep roots in Charleston. My family has been here for generations. My great uncle served for 27 years as a city attorney for Charleston. My great-great-grandfather was the warden of the old jail. Today, I proudly follow in their footsteps of leadership by officially filing for mayor of the city of Charleston. What makes this even more special is being able to officially file in the William B. Regan Legal Center, which is the city-owned building at 50 Broad Street that houses the city legal department, and named in honor of my great-uncle Bill Regan." Where are you emotionally still 24 hours later?
Sure. You know, it's an honor to be able to serve the city of Charleston. I've done it for 12 years in city council. When I first decided that I wanted to get involved, the first person I went to go talk to was my Uncle Bill Regan, before he passed, unfortunately. But I had an opportunity to speak with him. He had been very involved in the community and certainly involved in being an architect for the city of Charleston, working alongside of Joe Riley and others for many, many years. And so I took a lot of interest in his knowledge and background and understanding what it took to be a great leader, what it takes to be a great person to lead our city, and really what it was all about. So to be able to file yesterday and take on a leadership role, or an opportunity to take on a leadership role to be the mayor of the city of Charleston is a great honor, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve our community in a more demonstrative way than I have on council as we move forward into the year.
And you talk obviously about your great uncle, William B. Regan. He was the city attorney. If he were alive today, working for the city of Charleston, knowing what he knows now about what's going on with the mayor's audit, how would he go about that?
I think that one of the things that he would probably look at is the fact that it's important for us to understand what we are dealing with at the mayor's office, the things that are the challenges, some of the poor mistakes that were made, lack of judgment, and those things. I think as a city attorney, he would probably have certainly given feedback, and as our current city attorney did to the mayor's office, to let them know that they need to be much more mindful and using better judgment in the way that they go about doing things in the city of Charleston. I think that he would be happy that we're taking on a leadership role at City Council to be able to identify these issues, but doing it in a way so that we make sure that the issues have been identified. We'll send those to the Ethics Commission likely. They'll be the ruling body that handles this moving forward. But City Council will have done its job. Our responsibility is when an issue is brought up, we identified it. We asked our auditor to look into it. He's done that. He's presented us with the facts, and we'll now move that on to the group that will make a decision on ultimately, makes a decision on that from an ethics standpoint.
When you take off your mayoral hat and you put on your city council member's hat, are there any more issues that you were kind of looking at in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, so some of the issues that I think, from the audit perspective, I'm assuming, yeah. So some of the issues, that I take as a city council member, when I first got involved in council, one of the things that Bill had told me, he said, you need to be very mindful to make a very clear separation between the responsibility and the role you have to the citizens of Charleston as a council member and what you do in your public life. There has to be a very clear separation, and you have to know all the rules, and you need to abide by them every single day. And that was something I took very, very seriously. And I spent a tremendous amount of time when I first got on council learning and understanding what those rules were, making sure that every time that something were to come up, that I made sure that I understood. And if I didn't know, I asked our legal department to give us a guidance and advice on things to make sure that I was personally doing the right thing. And I think that's what's important for our leaders to be able to do, and certainly for not only at City Council, but the mayor's office as well.
And I know that audit is actually heading to the Ethics Commission. Would City Council still actually recommend an outside firm, somebody who's not in South Carolina?
I think there was some some council members had said that they felt like maybe an outside auditor would have been more appropriate. But at this point in time, my opinion is I think we've got enough information that we can turn this over to the authorities who will then take it, because the Ethics Commission will do their own investigation. And that's what their job is, that's their role, and I think that will be appropriate. If there are other things that they uncover, that will be something that they will be doing as part of their investigation. But I think the things that we've uncovered, I believe that we've uncovered what exists. I guess you really don't know unless you've turned over every single rock, but at some point, we've got to recognize that these things that have come up that are ethics issues are now outside of the scope of council. It's really the Ethics Commission's responsibility to take that from here.
Let me turn to the environment. We're sitting outside right here in downtown Charleston, and I want to talk to you about construction, particularly in the rural areas of Charleston. What is your plan to deal with ongoing construction in low-lying parts of the city and properties that annex into the city? We know of the Dutch dialogues and their recommendations, but what is your plan to make certain that the construction won't destroy the ability of the land to deal with water?
Sure. One of the issues we have that development is causing in the community is that it's happening in a way that it's infill projects. And so when we have situations where we have infill projects, those projects are looking at their stormwater runoff and identifying how those sites deal specific to their site, but they don't necessarily then identify how they deal with the sites once that water leaves their site and goes into our drainage system. As an example, I met with a group of private engineers not too long ago, trying to understand more about the drainage systems that we have, and some that are in place. We have collapsing pipes all over the place, sure, and really understanding what we need to do moving forward. And one of the things that they brought to my attention is we have what I'll call the funnel effect that occurs all over the city of Charleston. For example, there was a project that was happening on James Island. It was going to have stormwater runoff from that one project. It was going into a retention pond that had 3 48-inch pipes. That's plenty of ability to be able to run that water off and move the water out where it needs to go. Unfortunately, what they then found was those 3 48-inch pipes tied into one 18-inch pipe, hence the funnel effect. And so we've got that happening all over the city. We need to be mindful that as we grow and our city grows and develops, we've got to be looking at things and asking ourselves not necessarily what happens on that site with stormwater and how they move their water, but how is it affecting everything else, and most importantly, from that site all the way to the outfall, we have to chase that out and understand, do we have the right size pipes to get this water out off of just these sites and all the way out? And when we don't, we need to begin to identify and prioritize and right-sizing our pipes. That's one of our biggest issues we have across the city of Charleston, is we've got to make sure that we have pipes underground, many of which are appropriate capacity, but they're either clogged or they need to be cleaned out, or in some cases they do need to be larger. In many cases downtown, they're completely collapsed. So we've got to be very mindful of maintaining the assets we have, but we do that in combination with those folks who are developing in the city of Charleston and making sure we're all working together. We all have the same goal in mind, and that is to make sure that when it rains and it's high tide, that we're not constantly flooded out and our city comes to a complete stalling stop. And so as we move forward, the private sector can certainly help us out in that regard as well.
And I'm wondering, this might be a complicated question, but what new ordinances would you propose to prevent loss of habitats, compromised water management, and adverse effects on neighboring properties?
So I think one of the things that we would start with is the new Stormwater Manual that we're working on right now. I actually sit on that committee as it stands. It's a very large committee made up with a number of stakeholders, not only city council members, myself, and Peter Shade sits on that committee, but we have folks from the engineering community, development community, and others who are working collectively to come up with the right things that we need to do and how we develop and manage stormwater, manage our environment over time. That's a big one. So that's one of the things that we'll do that will require an action of council. And out of that, I do suspect that we'll find other things that we will want to change within our zoning codes to make sure that we adhere to what ultimately that stormwater manual says.
And if you're elected mayor today, where in the
Not
city?
if, when.
Oh, I have to stay out long. They'll get on me. But where in the city budget would you find the money? for this?
For the stormwater well, we've already actually budgeted that. That's already within. We're already going through that process. We budgeted that. We actually have AECom, who we've got a contract with. They're actually working with us on that, and we'll continue to look to do that. We actually, when it comes to things, whether it be stormwater or others, we have the stormwater fund and the ways that we can fund those directly. But in some cases, what we're going to also have to do, specifically as we move forward, is we're going to have to create some mandates. And one of the things that I will do as mayor of the city of Charleston is I will create a fiscal mandate, meaning that every single time that we sit down to do the budget, we will be mandated by law, by ordinance, to be able to make sure that we're adhering to and putting resources towards maintenance of our existing facilities, whether it be stormwater or our beautiful parks. But we've got to get better at making sure we're prioritizing what we have. And I will do that, and I will make that a fiscal mandate for our budget.
And how would you work with Charleston City Council to push for a moratorium on destructive developments?
So one of the things that we found, the word moratorium is really it's become a bad word because it's sort of you're closed for business. And problem when you do that is cities only have two choices. They're either growing or dying. There's no in the middle. And so moratoriums tend to send the wrong message to any business owner. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody building a hotel. It could be somebody who's interested in bringing a large company like Boeing to the city of Charleston. And if we put up a closed for business sign, all of those groups will take the same impression, not just the people that we might want to start slowing or temping down the pressure on some of these developments. So we have to be very, very careful on how we move that forward. But the way we do affect that is we make sure that council, and I work with a lot of council members, many who have endorsed me and quite frankly asked me to run for mayor. Okay. And I will work with them, and we will collectively come up with the right process moving forward. And that is, I'll create a vision for our city and what we want. I will do it collectively working with our council members who represent the districts and what their districts needs and what they want. Making sure that as we move forward, we have a clear vision and we understand, and then we put behind that appropriate civic planning. We begin to plan around that, and recognizing that we have stormwater issues, parking issues, traffic issues, all of which have to be addressed as we focus. We have to continue to grow as a city. We can't, otherwise we go backwards. But what we have to do is be very mindful of it. The other thing I'll do is I'll build out a true economic development department, and within that department, it will be focused on making sure that the types of things that we want built in our city, that we're proactively as a city working collectively towards attracting those things, and the things that we necessarily may not desire more of, that group will necessarily not be focused on that, but we'll focus on the things that we do want. We can be very proactive at the city in getting things done, but what we have to do is make sure that we know what we want those things to be. Council has to be involved in those discussions. Council has to be able to give the mayor input as to what those need to be, and I've shown that over my 12 years in council. That's the reason why so many of them are endorsing me, and that's why I intend to do as mayor.
Now, what is your civic plan?
So civic planning for me means that we're going to focus on looking at the existing infrastructures that we have. We have, whether it be stormwater runoff, parking, traffic. I'll use those three as an example. I mentioned the maintenance issue from stormwater runoff, and so that'll be number one, is making sure that maintenance is taken care of, that our pipes are clean, our outfalls are clean, our ditches are dug, all of those things, we have the right size pipes. When it comes to traffic, we're going to focus on making sure that we're identifying ways to build what I call job centers. For example, in West Ashley, where you have the majority of the city of Charleston actually reside today, well, 85% of the people who live in West Ashley get in their car every single day and travel somewhere else outside of West Ashley to go to work. But if we had job centers created within West Ashley where those people can live and work in the same community, think of how many trips we can take, vehicle trips we could take off of I-26 every single day. And it's those kind of things that we can do from a civic planning standpoint. That doesn't necessarily mean we always have to focus on trying to build wider roads and bigger roads and more roads, because quite frankly, those are very expensive and take lots of time. But being focused from an economic development standpoint on things like creating job centers that also have the added benefit of improving traffic in our community, those are things we can do right away. Those are things that we can do now. And that's one of the things that I want to do. I don't want to study anymore. I don't want to talk about what we're going to do. I want to start putting some of these plans into action. I want to start getting things done in our city.
You talk about 526. Let me ask you, what is your position on that?
So I'm supportive of 526, and I have been. You know, there's I know there's some folks on Johns Island and James Island and mostly Johns Island, who would say that their concern is that 526 is going to take away the rural character of Johns Island. Well, I hate to say it, but the amount of permits that have already been, houses that have already been permitted to be built on Johns Island, they're there, they're coming, that's happening. And so inevitably, the only way we're going to basically be able to move forward is to be able to build 526 to make that so that community can actually have a safer opportunity to get on and off of that island when it comes to storms. I mean, if you build, 6, 7, 8,000 more houses on Johns Island, and then you try to put all those folks on 2 roads trying to get off during a hurricane, that's a bad situation. And we need to take opportunity to make sure that we're focused on saying, okay, look, we recognize the development is occurring. It's not if, it is occurring. So let's go ahead and at least make sure that we've got the infrastructure in place to address it.
And, I talk to a lot of people all the time on the island, and they ask, do you believe it's reasonable to have an open checkbook for a project that a lot of people say that they don't have a definite cost estimate to it?
Well, I think anytime, I'm a banker by trade. I was a banker for 20 years. And so when it comes to anything, I will tell you, number one, I'm a fiscal conservative. I always have been all my life. And I will tell you that I'm very focused on making sure that whatever plans that we have a meaningful and reasonable way to assure that we can pay for those projects. Now, this is a project, of course, that is at the county and state level. So the city doesn't play a direct role financially in it. We play more of a leadership role in making sure that we have a seat at the table, if you will. But I do think it's extremely important to make sure that no, we should never have an open checkbook for anything. That's number one. But I do believe that we need to make sure that the state and county know exactly what those costs will be, and that they have the resources set aside to do those projects. And I feel like, based on the input and the things that I'm seeing, that they do. I mean, that project is moving forward. They're in the process of acquiring land, and so they're moving forward with that project. And I believe that they have identified the resources they need to get it done.
And another resident asks this: could this borrowed money, as the resident asks, says, be better used to deal with flooding issues that are becoming more prominent?
I think that you're really, there's 2 different issues. I think there, what you've got is 526 and the use of the resources that are coming from the SIB and the county. Those are basically, that is for lack of better words, a shovel-ready project. That is ready to go and in process. The things that I think that probably those residents might be speaking to are more projects that are downtown-centric, is my guess. And there's 2 projects in particular that come to mind. One is the low battery. The other is Calhoun West.
Right.
Those projects are probably $500 million. Those resources that are going to be needed won't just come from one single source, and those are not even really fully through the design phases yet. So we're going to have to identify a lot more sources of funding to be able to get those identified. Part of that will come hopefully with the study that's being done by the Army Corps of Engineers, because we're going to need the feds involved to pay for a project like that. But we also, again, going all the way back, we need to be making sure that on a daily and annualized basis, when it comes to maintenance and getting things done in our city, that we're at least taking the opportunity to start addressing those things now. $500 million is a lot of money to be able to put together for a project. It's also going to take a long time to get that project funded and completed. I use the Septima Clark Parkway, Spring Fishburne.
Right.
That's a 10-year project, but before that even got funded, that was sort of in the works for probably another 10 years before that. So, and unfortunately now, under the current administration, it's $40 million over budget. So we got to recognize that, yes, those projects, Calhoun West, Spring Fishburne, we've got to get it completed, and then also the low battery. All of those things are important, and we need to be prioritizing and making sure that we're looking for resources. But 526 and those, as far as the completion of that, they're really 2 different animals, I think. You've got one where it's basically shovel-ready, ready to go, and the funding resources have already been identified. We've got to take these other 2 on and identify resources for them, specific for them.
Where are your resources?
So, one of the things that the city can do is really, I would tell you that our opportunity from funding large projects like this is to be able to do all of the legwork, if you will, from a design phase element, and being able to put together the project so that we can go to bigger funding sources, whether it be through the Army Corps of Engineers at the federal level, at the state level, and others. That the city has a $200 million annual budget. So the reality is that the city's never going to individually be able to fund a $400 million budget or $400 million project by itself. We're going to have partners. And so therefore, what the city can do is take a leadership role and prioritize those and make sure that we've designed them, we've got them prepared so that we can put them out for grants, we can go and meet with the people we need to meet with, and do all the things that are necessary to attract those folks who do have the resources that we can be able to put into these projects.
And as a disclaimer, we've already had pro 526 folks on Quintin's Close-Ups, and I hope to have them back on again. And those who haven't seen the interviews, it's on Quintin's Close-Ups, so you can download the app or look it on YouTube. But let me talk to you about your voting record.
Sure.
If I were to look at it today, Would I find anything interesting?
I think what you'll find with me is I'm very consistent. When I tell you, if I tell you something, I can assure you can go back and look at my voting record, and you'll see that's exactly the way that I vote. And I've always been that way. I recognize that I can't make everyone happy with a vote. I recognize that what my job is to make sure is that I listen to all the people who I was elected to represent, and I have to take into consideration all the things that are important to them, their quality of life, and then I make my votes based upon that. And so I think what you would find is that consistency in my voting record exists, and it will as mayor. And I will make sure that as mayor as well, I work with my colleagues on council and communicate with them that when I have projects that I believe are important to our city as a whole, I'll work with them to garner their support in making sure we get those passed.
And as another disclaimer, I hope to have Mayor Tecklenburg on Quintin's close-ups, and I've already had Seegings and a couple other people who are going to come on as well, so hope to have you back on as well.
Certainly. Thank you.
And again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Quintin.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, sir.